Good evening. Today is the 20th of August, 2022. I'm Robert Crescione.
I'm John Gatsis.
Welcome to America in Danger. You know, I want to recite just a little portion of the Declaration of Independence, and it was talking about King George, but in this case, I'm going to put a modern spin on it.
Sort of like the Good News Bible from years ago, rewritten in sort of modern prose.
There you go.
Yeah.
And because in this case, it's not King George and it's not Joe Biden.
Mm-hmm.
It's more of a they,
Mm-hmm.
because this is a group of people.
Now, you're not saying that Joe Biden's become transgender, are you?
No.
This
has nothing to do with pronouns.
This is the traditional they,
That
the
is
actual
correct.
grammatically correct, normal usage of the word they.
That is correct.
Okay,
This
just
has
wanted to
nothing to do with pronouns.
Just wanted to get straight,
Yep,
because
yep.
it's very complicated these days.
Well, you got to make that clear now, because I'm going to tell you what, it's just gotten ridiculous with that. I see bathrooms with he, she, and they on it now.
I know.
But anyway, in the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson wrote that he, referring to King George, sent out swarms of officers to harass his people. And in this case, it's they. They have erected a multitude of new offices, meaning the IRS with 87,000 new agents that are going to be hired.
Yeah, that's a huge affront.
They've sent out a swarm of officers to harass and eat out the substance of the people.
Right.
And that's what's going to happen. Anyone that's foolish enough to believe that only people making over 400,000 will be audited.
Well, I
got a bridge for sale.
Yeah, I just saw a little study today, a little analysis saying that the bulk of the taxes raised by the so-called Inflation Reduction Act, which nobody's calling it that anymore. Now it's a climate bill. Now that it's passed, is what they're calling it. What it really is, a climate bill and a tax bill. The majority of those taxes are going to come from small businesses who gross less than $200,000 a year,
and who have the fewest resources to fight jackbooted thugs coming in and interpreting arbitrary and capricious regulation.
That's right, because I think even people who don't really have a complicated tax picture understand that the rules are so nebulous and so subject to interpretation by design, because they want to be able to come in and make a decision that you've not complied. And it's very easy to do that. You can't even get the same answer twice if you call the IRS and try and get an answer to a question. It's very complicated. Deduction rules are complicated. Expensing rules are complicated. And it's all rather subjective.
Yeah.
And so they're going to impose all this on people, and they're going to rape the productive sector of this country.
Yeah, I agree. And who was it? Was it Stalin who said, "Show me the man, I'll show you his crime"?
Well, it was actually, I think it was Beria.
Okay.
Yeah, a Stalin,
Yeah.
I think Beria was ultimately airbrushed out of the history book.
Is he the one that
I think he's one of the ones. Yeah. There are a lot of them.
Yeah, well, that's what they want to do now. They want to erase history.
Yeah.
It's funny, I was watching The Man in the High Castle.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if the audience knows much about that, and I'm not going to get into it much. But anyway, the Nazis won the war. And,
it's a revision. It's part of a genre called revisionist history.
Correct.
Where and I think that's a P.K. Dick thing.
It is.
For people who are fans of Minority Report, Total Recall.
Mm-hmm.
All those were Philip K. Dick science fiction novels, and this came from that as well.
It is, and it's an Amazon production produced in the Amazon studios. But anyway, the Nazis have taken over the eastern part of the U.S., the Japanese have the western part.
Yeah.
Well, the Nazis are in a campaign to erase history and start from day one.
Yeah.
So everything in the past is gone, and the only history is from 0 day on of the Nazis, and they're rewriting it and simply erasing history, and that's what they want to do in this country.
And frankly, that's not so. I mean, in terms of P.K. Dick and his writings, because he wrote that book a long time ago. I read Man in the High Castle when I was in high school, and he didn't just invent that as a novel dystopian concept. That's exactly what they did in the French Revolution. That's what they did in the Bolshevik Revolution. I mean, that's a tried and true mechanism by which tyrannies perpetuate their success in dominating a society. They erase the history.
Yeah, it's the same with Ayn Rand and Atlas Shrugged.
Right.
You know, she saw what was going on, and of course, a lot of people missed the whole point of that. In fact, I was talking about it with someone one day, and they said, "Oh, that's the worst novel I've ever read, just full of scientific inaccuracies and whatever." And I thought, well, you didn't really understand the book.
Right, that's not really the point.
You didn't read the book.
Well,
you,
right.
You know, but that wasn't the point of the book. The point of the book was that there are men who want control.
That's right.
And they will take everything from the productive. They will force the productive to ask them to be able to produce.
Right.
And the only way they let you produce is if you pay them.
And really, we touch on this frequently, but really, it's just from an academic standpoint, or even a clinical standpoint, maybe, it's a mindset that I cannot gain any insight into. I don't understand what drives certain people to think that way. And yet, there's a lot of them. And a lot of them are got their hands on the tiller right now.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. You know, and many, I firmly believe that people who are elected to office and allowed to have power and authority, I think that there's a physical change in their brain structure, and they develop a psychosis because look what we have. Look at Nancy Pelosi, Mitch McConnell, McCarthy in the House, Lindsey Graham. The list goes on and on and on. And all of these subgroups, like Mayorkas and Merrick Garland, and all
they're just second-rate wannabes.
Second-rate wannabes, but they've been given a taste of power and
Correct.
authority,
That's correct.
It's distorted their brain. And you know, Lord Acton said, "Absolute power corrupts absolutely,"
Right.
and I think he understood that it corrupts not the individual. It corrupts their mind.
I bet there's a good chance, not to get all Dr. Phil here, but I bet there's a good chance that if you really delved into the childhoods of these various people, you'd find out a lot of them, you know, weren't taken seriously and got beat up a lot on the playground. I think that's where a lot of that mentality, you know, derived the whole Dr. Evil thing. You know, I just think that's where that emanates, perhaps. I mean, again, that's just amateur armchair psychiatry or psychology. I think we digress quite a bit here.
Well, we have, and probably will some more.
Yeah, but it's fun, so I don't care.
You know, and speaking of individuals like that, Mitch McConnell.
Yeah.
You know, there's a red wave, and I mean, you see it everywhere. You see it in the comments on the websites. You see it on the comments after articles, and people are tired of it. People have come to realize what's going on in this country, and there's a red wave coming. But people like Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy and some of these other politicians are doing their best.
Yeah, uniparty shills is what they are.
They're doing their best to take the wind out of
That's correct. They are. They don't. That's correct.
Mitch McConnell says, "Well, I don't know that it's going to be a sweep. We might pick up 3 or 4 seats, but it's the quality of the candidates."
Right. We know what that means.
We know exactly what that means.
Yeah.
He hates Trump with a passion because Trump was exposing these people.
That's right. And Trump's managed to get a lot of his endorsed candidates, you know, in these primaries to win in these primaries.
In fact, I watched a video with Eric Trump in it, and I think it's 176 endorsed candidates who have won their primaries to 6 who have lost.
Yeah.
Now, if I were at the track and someone came to me and said, "Look, I know the horses. Look,
I
picked the winner 176 times out of 182. I'd be like, which one do I vote? Tell me which one.
Might even borrow against my, you know, my retirement plan to, you know, participate in those bets.
You got that right. But you know, people like Mitch McConnell, they need to go.
Absolutely.
You know, Kevin McCarthy wants to be Speaker of the House, but he only wants a thin majority.
Yeah, he's going to be the biggest disappointment. I'll tell you, people. If assuming that we do retake the House, Kevin, it's going to be another Paul Ryan all over again.
Yes,
I mean, the problem I have with all this is that we really, even when we have the ability to get our agenda through, we don't take it.
Right.
And by we, I mean there are fifth column quislings okay, in the ranks in the House of Representatives and the Senate that thwart the effort every time, because they really are part of a uniparty. Mm-hmm. They're part of a permanent Washington establishment, and whatever his flaws, Donald Trump was not part of that.
Right.
And he kind of pulled the veil off of it. Look, you gotta realize the reason. I mean, they obviously were afraid of him. If they're spending another a year and a half after out of office, they're raiding his house and his home, and still inflicted or afflicted with Trump derangement syndrome to an unprecedented degree. It's amazing watching these people.
It is.
Well, that's because it's not him they hate or are worried about. It's me and you and people who are slowly waking up from their deep slumber.
Exactly. You know, and these people, they are so fond of projection and deflection. Mm-hmm. You know, they want everyone to believe that everyone else is doing these bad things when it's they themselves.
That's right.
Whether they like that pronoun or not, they themselves.
Right.
But, you know, here's Nancy Pelosi, here's all of these individuals saying, oh, no one is above the law. No former president is above the law. We've got to apply the law equally. Merrick Garland. No one is above the law. We've got to apply the law equally. Well, you're not doing that. And the American people are not stupid, except that 41% who watch sitcoms and TikTok videos.
Yeah, the so-called, what I call the food court statistical sample.
Yes, exactly. The people who really don't pay attention to anything and really shouldn't be voting.
Well, that's correct. And maybe, fortunately, maybe about half of them don't. I don't know. But you're right. I mean, the margin by which elections are won or lost in this country are much smaller than the size of the ignorant vote. So that is the segment of the vote that is focused upon with the ads and the campaign money. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's where it goes. You know, I'm not changing my mind based on some dumb ad.
Well,
or probably even, and not even a debate. You know, because all people should require is position papers, voting history, okay, some philosophical statements. That's all that's required.
That's it.
You know, these big expensive campaigns, people decry, it's the money in politics. We have to get the money out. That's why, you know, we need term limits. We don't need term limits. We got term limits. It's called elections.
Exactly.
Okay? We need voter eligibility reform, because if people are so easily manipulated by money in politics, then they're not qualified to vote.
Exactly.
It's that simple.
They're being bribed.
They're being
bought.
They're being bribed, or they're being manipulated.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I don't know. I mean, these elaborate ads that they run on television, if you're basing your vote on an ad that you've seen during a political season or campaign, you're not up to speed. You haven't studied enough. Okay, so that's my take on that.
I agree. I completely agree. Well, you know, speaking of no one being above the law, well, I happened to download a list of it's 4 pages worth of people who are apparently, in fact, above the law.
Well, I guess I don't know why this article isn't entitled high-profile individuals who, in fact, are above the law, apparently.
Exactly.
Empirically speaking, are obviously above the law.
Exactly. And let's start with President Joe Biden. He avoided paying hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes. Now, isn't he fond of saying, you need to pay your fair share? Come on, man.
It's patriotic.
It's patriotic to pay your fair share, man. Come on. Yeah. So, they dodged about $517,000 in Medicare and Obama taxes between 2017 and 2020. And yet, no one raised an eyebrow.
Right.
Let's see. Hunter Biden. Woohoo. Hunter Biden, yeah.
Well, he's just a walking felony.
Well, I tell you what, he's got video recordings of him engaging in criminal escapades.
Crack cocaine. Firearms violations.
Yes. And apparently, he's above the law.
Well, obviously.
And selling influence.
I mean, I hate to do the what about kind of deal, but if this had been any one of Trump's children, you know, there would have been so much activity, so much legal activity, and nonstop, you know, media coverage. And yet here it's just crickets. Well, and you can just look at Hunter Biden. He's a total and complete, unrepentant, unrecoverable degenerate.
Yeah,
absolutely. You know, and that's fine. You want to be a degenerate? Fine, I don't care. But don't do it on my dime. And the problem with him is he has actually created a situation where the United States and its leadership are compromised with respect to the communist Chinese.
Absolutely. You know, he traveled around in Air Force Two with Joe Biden as vice president, cutting deals with the Chinese, selling influence.
Right.
You know, and yet he's not investigated.
Absolutely. He should at least be, under investigation and probably in deep trouble.
Yes, absolutely. Of course, Hillary Clinton, we know that.
That's a whole...
that's a whole show.
That's
right
a whole
there.
segment, at least, if not a show. Yeah.
There's no need to explain her.
Right.
The whole Benghazi thing. Susan Rice.
Benghazi, 32,000 emails, the server, bleach bit, ball peen hammers to cell phones.
Yep.
That's just the stream of consciousness summary there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We have 3.5 million illegal border crossers.
They're clearly not above the law. I mean, they're clearly above the law.
Absolutely. In fact, they can get on an aircraft and fly around the U.S. with just a court summons.
Yeah, in fact, I saw the summary today. At this point in time, during Joe Biden's period in office, 5 million. 5 million have crossed that border illegally.
And, I saw a thing the other day. It said 5 tons of fentanyl have come across the border just this year. Just this year. Now, if you do the math, 2 milligrams of fentanyl is deadly to humans.
Right.
All right, so 5 tons. That's enough to kill 48 billion people. 48 billion people. Not million, 48 billion.
Right.
If you dole out 2 milligrams to each of them, that's 48. That's more than the population of the United States.
Well, 48 billion is more than the population of the Earth by about 6 times.
Yes, it is. So, come on, people. Someone is above the law. Let's see Gavin Newsom. They partied down while everybody else was locked down.
Right.
All the rioters. How about all the rioters who rioted?
Oh, yeah. Well, they got bailed out immediately with funds, provided by Kamala Harris.
Exactly. The climate insurrectionists. We actually had insurrectionists who physically fought with police and vandalized the building.
Right.
Now, these weren't the January 6 people, who were instigated by the FBI, by the way, because they now know that there were at least 40 FBI agents embedded in the crowd.
Right. That's right.
So tell me why Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of D.C. turned down the National Guard?
Well, that's right. Now, I don't know if the message is clear to the American people writ large, but the people of Wyoming clearly get it. Because Liz Cheney lost her bid in the primary by a whopping 35, 40 points to the challenger. I mean, nobody's been beat like that, I think, really ever, in recent history anyway, in a high-profile political race. She got thumped and thumped hard, and the reason she did is because she made it her mission in life to go after Donald Trump and that January 6th nonsense.
And here's a prime example of the derangement syndrome. Not the Trump derangement syndrome, but the power derangement syndrome that we talked about earlier in the show. After being soundly renounced by the people of Wyoming and the people of this nation, she turns around, compares herself to Lincoln,
Abraham Lincoln,
and kind of alludes to to the possibility that she might run for president.
I mean,
now that is...
Talk about tone deaf.
That's psychotic.
Right.
That is psychotic behavior.
Well, first of all, she has a little bit of the Hillary problem. She's fundamentally unlikable.
Yes.
I mean, just as a person, as a human being, she's unlikable, and you got to have a little element of that, in the whole retail politics game, as I understand it. And she does not have any of it. And I just think it's hilarious that she has allied herself with people that just a few years ago were characterizing her father and herself as Darth Vader and the most evil people on the planet, which may not have been a completely inaccurate characterization. But the point is that it shows how quickly their loyalties switch up.
Absolutely.
I mean, the minute they're done with her. Okay, I mean, she tried to curry favor with the left with all this nonsense. She even tried to get Democrats to vote in the primary to salvage her flailing. I mean, she knew it was
a switch party.
Yeah. So I at least take a tiny bit of solace in the fact that she is gone and probably gone for good.
Yeah, I hope so. Right. I don't think she
coming to an MSNBC guest spot soon. Hosting spot soon. So.
Exactly. We had all the people who threatened these Supreme Court justices. We had the Pelosi family who dabbled in insider trading.
Well, that threat, that Supreme Court deal, that's really obnoxious. I mean, those people were outside those homes, and you had one guy that, tried to assassinate Kavanaugh.
Yeah.
I mean, really, pretty much no consequences.
And, the politicians like Maxine Waters and AOC and Nancy Pelosi who and Chuck Schumer, who had no issue with them doing that.
Right.
Had no issue with that.
Yeah, so the whole, nobody's above the law is absolute, you know what.
It is. And Eric Swalwell, I got to throw this one in last. There's still more. I'm not going through the whole list. But Eric Swalwell slept with a Chinese spy and still holds a top secret security clearance and sits on the Intelligence Committee.
Yeah, that one really boggles the mind.
That is unbelievable. How he retained his top secret security clearance, I'll never know, because if an airman in the Air Force talked to a Chinese spy, you know what would happen to his security clearance? Even though it's a low-level security clearance?
Oh, well, they busted a guy.
Dishonorable discharge as well.
I mean, it was in the news a couple years ago. They threw a guy out and subjected him to prosecution because he took a selfie with some submarine gear in the background.
I remember that.
I mean,
I remember that.
Really an innocent thing that he did overall.
Yeah.
Certainly didn't warrant the kind of punishment he got.
No, absolutely did not. And with that, we got to take a little break. When we come back, we're going to talk about some things, maybe some Peter Navarro topics. And, then we're going to talk about some corporatization things.
Okay, all sounds interesting.
You want to stay tuned for that? We'll be back in just a minute.
Are you afraid to answer the phone because of bill collectors? A Chapter 13 plan can help. Chapter 13 allows people with too many bills to work out a debt repayment plan under federal law. It helps you control your debts instead of your debts controlling you. Chapter 13 stops creditors from harassing you and stops repossessions and foreclosures. It allows you to answer the phone again without fear or worry. Call H. Frank Allen, Attorney at Law, a debt relief agency providing bankruptcy relief under the Bankruptcy Code.
Safe and secure. These two words are simple yet powerful. In order to feel this way, you should know that you have the tools necessary to provide safety and security for yourself and your loved ones. As with any tools, learning how to properly use them is best learned from experts who we know we can trust. Experts who have a proven track record and a commitment to serve and protect. Enroll now in Sheriff Keystone's North Carolina Concealed Handgun Carry class, taught at the CPF Training Center in Rocky Mount. Sheriff Stone utilizes a first-in-class classroom environment and indoor firing range. This ensures a training experience that is welcoming to both first-time firearms students and those with more experience. An attentive staff that takes time to teach students the legal requirements of becoming a permitted concealed carry citizen. In addition, Sheriff Clee Atkinson teaches students situational awareness, self-defense, and skills needed to avoid becoming a victim. As you know, Sheriff Stone and Sheriff Atkinson have committed their lives to serving and protecting. There is a reason Sheriff Stone and Sheriff Atkinson's class book in advance. Come learn from two of the region's most seasoned and professional public servants. Safety and security, two simple but powerful words that can be a part of who you and your family are. Call 252-813-8898. Register today.
Every dad deserves comfort that's just right. And at the Badcock Home Furniture and More Father's Day sale, that's exactly what you'll find. Starting with buy one, get one free recliners. Plus, save hundreds on reclining sofas and sectionals. And get a free foundation with select mattresses, including Sealy. Find the styles and savings that are just right for Dad. Only at Badcock Home Furniture and More. Just right.
You know, one of the things that was a problem in the Trump administration was Trump picked a few really questionable individuals to be advisors and to be close in the administration.
That's being kind.
Yeah, I think so. That's being kind. You know, I really think that he should have had daily firings to get rid of these people. You
I
know,
do too.
give them a day or two, and if it turns out that they're not doing what they need to do,
Right.
out the door. And one of those individuals was his son-in-law, Jared Kushner.
Right.
Now, you know, I think Peter Navarro came out and said, yeah, he calls him the clown prince. You know, Kushner tried to undermine everything Trump was doing, and you know, he basically got there riding on the coattails of Trump's daughter as son-in-law.
I guess Navarro wrote an op-ed piece.
Yeah.
And he laid all this out.
Yeah.
And for those who don't remember which one Peter Navarro is, he's that straight shooting, take no prisoners trade advisor in the Trump administration. One of the handful of guys that I really actually liked.
Yeah.
I mean, I really, you know, wish we had a few more people like that. I mean, he'd push back on these reporters and be a little bit sharp-tongued with them, which they needed to be.
Yeah,
but his ideas and his policies that he implemented with respect to China were very good, and he spilled the beans on a lot of aspects, you know, of the Trump administration. He kind of revealed what went on with COVID and Dick Mulvaney, and is it Dick Mulvaney? Yeah. And now he's exposed one of the weakest links in the upper echelons of the Trump administration were, and it was Trump's own son-in-law, Jared Kushner.
Yeah.
Okay, married to Ivanka, and really just, really, I think, truth be told, a typical New York liberal.
Yeah.
All right. So the charge that Peter levels is that he thwarted the America First agenda at every level, and cultivated a sense of complacency about the upcoming 2020 election.
Yeah.
And I think all those things are probably true. I never liked that guy. I think that's the problem with family stuff.
Right.
You know, I mean, I've had some experience with that in work relationships and everything, and it can be very difficult to overcome those relationships. And people make promises and they do things, and so Trump, you know, he had to probably accede to some of those things that Kushner wanted to do. Total disaster. A real and Navarro is really not pulling any punches.
Right.
Apparently Kellyanne Conway didn't like him much either.
That's my understanding as well. Absolutely. So
Well,
hopefully,
I didn't like him, so we're all on the same page there.
well, hopefully, if Trump goes in 2024, hopefully Kushner will be nowhere in
Nowhere to
sight.
be seen. Yeah, and hopefully he'll be a little more circumspect about. I mean, for example, Trump appointed Christopher Wray to the FBI on the recommendation of Chris Christie. That doofus governor of New Jersey who disgraced himself in a number of ways. People kind of liked him in the beginning because he would talk back to the reporters. But ultimately, he's a big fat, and I mean that literally and figuratively, rhino, capitulating Republican type, the worst type he's the archetype for what's destroying this country on our side of the aisle.
I agree. Now, something else destroying this country is the basically corporate takeover of so many things in this nation. Corporations, with the advent of globalism, the corporate heads realize that, well, we don't need governments. Governments need to work for us. That's why they spend billions a year on lobbyists. That's why they have numerous politicians in their pockets. They understand that governments are there to constrain the little people,
right,
and to control the little people, while they do the bidding for the corporations.
And isn't that really the essence of fascism?
It is.
It's really a phrase that has grown in popularity and favor among a lot of conservatives. I think until very recently was the whole public-private partnership. One time that was considered overtly un-American. I mean,
Absolutely.
You did not mix government and private activity in any way, shape, or form. And that's been kind of a lead-in to some of what's going on now.
Yep.
And what's happened is these corporations, they have no allegiance to this country.
That's correct.
And when you reach a level of power where you're talking about a corporate monopoly over power versus a governmental one. Well, when they're kind of merged, there's really no difference. The corporations really have become the government, and the government have become the corporations. There's no substantive distinction between them, and I think people get really misled on that. You know, I mean, they think, well, a country like communist China, it's completely different from a society where the world is run by corporations. It's not. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Every corporation in communist China is fundamentally part of the government.
That is correct.
Okay, and if the corporations become the government, well, how is that different from communism? It's not.
Exactly.
It's communism. It's fascism. It's fundamentally it's a structure for society that eliminates individual choice and individual liberty.
Absolutely. Well, Blackrock, we talked about it last week. Blackrock, huge investment firm. Currently, 19 state attorneys have sent a letter to Blackrock. They've joined in an open letter to Blackrock saying, you know what? You need to end your ESG garbage.
Right.
You need to return to the duty that you owe to your investors, and that's to make a profit.
Right.
And you need, basically BlackRock is a revolving door of government officials.
That's right.
If you look at the Biden administration, they have a very close relationship, with senior officials in the administration, in the Federal Reserve. Brian Deese, he's global head of sustainable investing at BlackRock. He served as senior advisor to President Barack Obama.
Right.
All right.
All right.
Let's see, who else? Global chief investment strategist and former Obama official Michael Pyle now serves as a chief economic advisor to Kamala Harris.
Right.
Treasury Secretary previously served as chief of staff to BlackRock CEO Mike Fink.
Right.
It's just...
Well, and here's the thing about like BlackRock and Vanguard and there's one other that really
State
sort of a triumvirate of these
the big three.
Yeah, the big three, these ESG titans. What they're doing is they're using the power of other people's capital in aggregate to push a certain agenda.
Exactly.
That the people who actually own the capital, people like you and me, don't approve of. Okay, and that's what makes it such an affront. Okay, so people are slowly, I think, starting to wake up to that as well. I mean, they claim that, well, look, we are. I mean, first of all, I think people aren't strictly clear on this. Corporations and their boards have a fiduciary responsibility. That means they are legally bound. It's just like when you hire a real estate agent. They have a fiduciary responsibility, meaning they are legally bound to treat your assets and your interests as if it were their own. Okay? And BlackRock is in violation of those fiduciary responsibilities. It's not just a moral thing, it's a legal thing.
Correct.
Okay, now their argument is, well, we are looking out for shareholder value. We don't address climate change and we don't do all these things, but those things are highly disputable, highly debatable. In fact, I think they can show to be complete hoaxes. Yeah. But BlackRock has no business forcing ESG policies on the nation and on millions of investors using their own retirement funds fundamentally against them.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's why these 19 states have joined in with this letter, because they've got pension funds invested in BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. I've got a clip, and we talked about it last week, from Rollerball, and I want to run that because it clearly shows the construct of the corporate takeover, of the corporate control. And watch this and listen to it. This is a movie. It's a mid-70s movie, science fiction deal, dystopian. The world is run by several corporations and it's corporate government. And there's this game called Rollerball, which is brutal and violent, designed to demonstrate the futility of individual achievement. They don't, that's not explained to the masses. It's used as sort of a late Rome gladiator type of outlet for the masses and their frustrations. But its fundamental purpose is to demonstrate the futility of individual effort. And there's this scene here, I think, really encapsulates in a lot of ways where we are now. It does.
This is a prophetic movie in its day. I think it was meant as an anti-capitalist screed, but I think it really is an anti-authoritarian, anti-communist creed as well. I just don't think the maker of the movie realized it quite at the time.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. And when you throw in the World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab,
Right.
with what he's saying and what they're doing and working with corporations, because BlackRock is highly involved in the World Economic Forum.
Right.
So you've got these huge corporations. You've got the tax-free foundations, which the Reese report back from the 60s advocated abolishing tax-free foundations because they realized that they were contributing to the destruction of this nation,
Right.
and still are. But anyway, take a look at this. Pay close attention to what's said here about the corporate control and corporate provisions,
Right.
and those kind of things. I even put some subtitles in here to help you if you can't hear the audio very well. But Lee, if you'll run that clip for me, take a look at this, and we'll be right back afterwards.
Come in, Jonathan. Keep silence with me for a minute, won't you? It's important to have a place to think things out. You have your ranch. I know you take a lot of pleasure in it.
I cut my finger.
Sorry. Yeah. You've had an amazing career, John. You know how proud we are of the Houston team and what we think of you at Energy. But now, there are executives who want you out.
Sure.
You've had 10 years in this game, Jonathan. Longer than anyone ever.
Retire? How can I do that?
On your special program. There are some who feel that this program should now be used to announce your retirement.
Who wants that?
And this special was first planned by us here at Energy. We saw it as a good thing. Now the executive directorate wants a change. The program is scheduled, the whole world is waiting for it, so this does seem perfect time.
The team, they depend on me.
Jonathan, let's think this through together. You know how a game serves us. There's a definite social purpose. Nations are bankrupt, gone. None of that tribal warfare anymore. Even the corporate wars were a thing of the past.
Yeah, well, I know that.
So now we have the majors and their executives. Transport, food, communication, housing, luxury, energy. A few of us making decisions on a global basis for the common good.
Team is a unit. It plays with certain rhythms.
So does an executive team, Jonathan. Now everyone has all the comforts, you know that. No poverty, no sickness, no needs, and many luxuries which you enjoy just as if you were in the executive class. Corporate society takes care of everything. And all it asks of anyone, or it has ever asked of anyone ever, is not to interfere with management decisions.
I don't mean to resist. I'm just trying to understand.
This is for your own benefit. You must know that, Jonathan. All decisions concerning you are. So, now you're going to retire. That shouldn't be too hard for you. It's a stupid game after all. Awful game. You ought to be glad to be out of it.
I don't know, Mr. Bartholomew. I just don't know. I realize you had nothing to do with Ella leaving me.
Jonathan,
But, you're right. I mean, I ought to do it. I mean, I ought to be perfectly happy to do what you say.
Take your time. Take a few days. Just come through a game, you're tired. Go to your ranch, but think about it. And understand it. Do understand it. Because I don't understand your resistance. And I don't think anyone else will either.
All right. A few making decisions on a global basis for everyone.
Right.
That's what Blackrock, that's what these politicians, that's what the World Economic Forum,
That's right.
it's what all of them want. They want the power.
That's right.
They want the power to control. And, you know, the whole concept of rollerball, the game, it goes back to the bread and circuses.
That's right.
And who was it? Nero that said, give them bread and circuses,
Mhm.
and you control the population.
Right, and I think, of course, the other feature or the aspect of the movie is that it, you know, in this setup, in this universe, they're very successful at providing material needs. Okay, now communism and authoritarianism and fascism historically have not been able to do that.
Correct.
Okay, but I think the purveyors of the current attempt to run things on a global basis with a few in charge believe that we're now at a point where we can provide those basic needs. You know, I think they believe wrongly, but I think they believe that technology has reached a point where we can produce enough food, you know, even if it's just bugs that have been transformed into some kind of edible protein, but we can produce enough food and enough entertainment and services to keep people happy. Actual productivity will still be greatly reduced because the ability to do things and to go forward and maybe, you know, expand our understanding, you know, reach out into the stars, all those kinds of things will be greatly muted, but these people will be in charge. But I think that's kind of, you know, the deal here. I think that's what, to me, Klaus Schwab could be a real stand-in for that character there. You know, a little bit different accent, but it's the same guy.
It is.
Same mentality.
It is, and if you listen to anything Klaus Schwab had said, you know, it's almost as if Klaus Schwab based his character on John Houseman.
Now, I am glad to see that their projection of 2018, which is when rollerball is supposed to be set, does not include the leisure suit, which apparently they did not. I mean, to me, it looks like their vision of the future was that the styles are going to be like the 70s.
I guess they thought those styles would last.
Either that or come full circle, maybe. So I don't know. So I'm grateful that hasn't come to pass anyway. But it seems like the worst elements of some of those predictions in that movie have come to pass.
Absolutely.
Or are on the eve of coming to pass.
On the eve of coming to pass, yeah. And, you know, I think that, you know, when you look at these dystopian movies, RoboCop, all of these things, there's always going to be that large portion of the lowest of the low that live in abject poverty, violence, basically the burned out ghettos in Detroit, Philadelphia, whatever. Yeah, I think even with all the advances of technology and all that, we'll always have that.
Always have that.
And they will be weaponized.
Well,
to
and the
control
thing is,
the middle class,
you know,
which is what they're doing right now.
And a lot of of course, science fiction, you know, with the exception of P.K. Dick, actually, he was actually not, I wouldn't call him a conservative thinker, but he was very distrustful of authoritarianism. Okay, all of his works were, I mean, if you look at, you know, A Scanner Darkly, Minority Report, Total Recall, a lot of, you know, the common theme is memory, but another common theme is totalitarianism and authoritarianism.
Right.
But from a maybe a left of center perspective, but still distrustful of that. Okay, and you know, that's the essence of all of these dystopian movies. Is that they often embrace the authoritarianism.
Right.
Okay, Rollerball embraces the authoritarianism, but in this particular case, it appears to suggest that we can provide these material needs. Okay, but wealth is a product of the mind.
Right.
All right, so there will always be, even if we do fundamentally solve problems of food distribution and how to make sure that nobody's really ever hungry, there'll still be haves and have-nots because people will begin to value different things.
Right.
Okay. I would argue that fundamentally we have eliminated poverty rates in the world are much lower now than they were
absolutely.
even 50 years ago, largely because of commerce, largely because of markets, productivity, innovation, and commerce. Okay, and I know I said commerce twice, but I think it's important, that important to emphasize that
Right.
fact. That's what even Bono says that.
Yeah.
Bono of U2, anybody who knows who that is,
Yeah.
he had a little bit of a come to Jesus moment on some of this stuff where he realized, look, I've been fighting my whole life, arguing that capitalism and all these things are so awful because really that's what's lifted people out of poverty worldwide.
It absolutely
And
has.
these folks that are in charge now, they're trying to actually reverse those trends.
Yeah, they are. And with that, we got to take a little break. When we come back, we're going to talk about some climate and how the facade's crumbling a little bit on this existential climate crisis.
I sure hope so.
I think it is. I think more people are realizing. So take a look at this. Word from our sponsors. We'll be back in just a minute.
Are you afraid to answer the phone because of bill collectors? A Chapter 13 plan can help. Chapter 13 allows people with too many bills to work out a debt repayment plan under federal law. It helps you control your debts instead of your debts controlling you. Chapter 13 stops creditors from harassing you and stops repossessions and foreclosures. It allows you to answer the phone again without fear or worry. Call H. Frank Allen, Attorney at Law, a debt relief agency providing bankruptcy relief under the Bankruptcy Code.
Safe and secure. These two words are simple yet powerful. In order to feel this way, you should know that you have the tools necessary to provide safety and security for yourself and your loved ones. As with any tools, learning how to properly use them is best learned from experts who we know we can trust. Experts who have a proven track record and a commitment to serve and protect. Enroll now in Sheriff Keystone's North Carolina Concealed Handgun Carry class, taught at the CPF Training Center in Rocky Mount. Sheriff Stone utilizes a first-in-class classroom environment and indoor firing range. This ensures a training experience that is welcoming to both first-time firearm students and those with more experience. An attentive staff that takes time to teach students the legal requirements of becoming a permitted concealed carry citizen. In addition, Sheriff Clee Atkinson teaches students situational awareness, self-defense, and skills needed to avoid becoming a victim. As you know, Sheriff Stone and Sheriff Atkinson have committed their lives to serving and protecting. There is a reason Sheriff Stone and Sheriff Atkinson's class book in advance. Come learn from two of the region's most seasoned and professional public servants. Safety and security, two simple but powerful words that can be a part of who you and your family are. Call 252-813-8898. Register today.
Every dad deserves comfort that's just right. And at the Badcock Home Furniture and More Father's Day sale, that's exactly what you'll find. Starting with buy one, get one free recliners. Plus, save hundreds on reclining sofas and sectionals. And get a free foundation with select mattresses, including Sealy. Find the styles and savings that are just right for dad. Only at Badcock Home Furniture and More. Just right.
All right, and as we were saying, I think the facade of the existential climate emergency is crumbling.
I hope so.
And I don't think a little paint and spackle's going to hold it up this time.
I hope so.
You know, there's a White House staffer, what's her name, Jane Lubchenco, and she is the Deputy Director for Climate and Environment at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy.
Like a nice made-up title.
Big time. Talk about do nothing.
Right.
Well, she was sanctioned by the U.S. Academy of Sciences and banned for 5 years for violating research protocols, and she peer-reviewed, evidently, a research paper that her brother-in-law had participated in, and it was based on all flawed science.
Right.
And the Academy actually retracted the paper.
Outstanding.
So,
which is while it's just one data point, it does prove that, scientists are just as subject to all the human, vices as anybody else. Greed,
Yes.
nepotism,
Yes, they are.
false glory.
Groupthink.
Groupthink. So she's basically a liar.
A liar.
And a cheat. And we're supposed to believe her proclamations and assessments on climate science.
And what's interesting
Not
is,
doing it.
In years past, the president would have gone to someone like that on his staff and said, I'll expect your resignation on my desk in the morning.
Right, can't have this.
Well, not in this case.
Right.
The White House is supporting her.
I'm sure.
Well, she made a poor decision, but, she's a good person. No, she's not a good person. She's a liar and a cheat and a grifter.
Yeah, what was it? I think they said, but now she's, I don't have the article in front of me. There's a bit at the end there where it talks about her new position or her present position, and I think I've got it here. Now, Dr. Lubchenco is playing a leading role in developing and overseeing this administration's best practices for scientific integrity.
So they've put the inmate in charge of the asylum.
That's right.
Is what that amounts to.
Right, and just to be
Criminals
clear-
running the jail.
And just to be clear, that statement was made after acknowledging her peccadillo with the
Yeah, so I guess she's learned her lesson
Yeah,
now,
yes.
and she will be just nothing but a model of integrity from here on out.
this is all. This is if you study how the Soviet government operated, it was exactly like that. Tons of incompetent functionaries running around, wielding arbitrary power, and she's a perfect example of how that's being manifested in our current move toward a Soviet-style existence.
Exactly. Well, that reminds me of a scene from Man in the High Castle. And I don't mean to keep bringing that up, but one of the Nazi high officials was guilty of what they would consider treasonous acts. All right. So his superior had gathered evidence of this. Well, he takes this to the new Fuhrer, since Hitler's died in
Right.
So he takes it to the new Fuhrer, and he's outlining all this stuff. And of course, J. Edgar Hoover's in this, right? And he's working with the Nazis because we know how
That
much
fits the narrative.
integrity
Yeah,
J.
right.
Edgar Hoover
Right.
had. But anyway, so they're explaining all of this, and this is about to be, you're guilty of treason, you're going to be executed, and all this stuff. Well, J. Edgar Hoover says, oh, no, you're mistaken. There is no evidence. So the Fuhrer knows that he's guilty.
Right.
He knows that there was evidence.
Sure.
He knows that it's been a betrayal of the other Nazi. So what's he do? Well, they cart the other Nazi off, the accuser. He goes. He's now banished. And the guilty one is promoted.
Right.
And that's exactly what we have here.
That's right.
She has been promoted.
That's right.
She is guilty of a trespass for which she should have been fired.
Absolutely.
For which, it would have been kindness to simply ask for her resignation.
Right.
In my mind, she should have been fired.
Well, and of course, I'd take an even harsher fundamentalist position that her whole professional existence is predicated on a lie and a hoax being used to destroy this country's energy independence and reshape the world. So, to me, that's a relatively minor offense.
Yeah.
But on the surface, and in terms of protocol, she should absolutely not be in charge of any department or any activity in the White House after this humiliation.
I agree. And, I said that the facade of the existential climate crisis is falling apart. Well, 1,100 scientists and scholars have come out and said there is absolutely no climate emergency. Now, this is
Right.
1,100 scientists led by a Nobel laureate, and they've all signed on to this, and they say, you know what?
It's a bunch of nonsense.
It's a bunch of nonsense.
Certainly doesn't warrant what we're proposing
No.
to do, none of which will have any impact one way or the other.
No,
It's just all used to, well, to me, again, you know, I don't think people realize all these climate models are just that. They're models, okay? They don't have any actual data that says there's a problem. They just have some fudged numbers that they've cranked into a model to predict all these dire things. But to me, the most salient bit of data that discredits these models is this fact here. The World Climate Declaration points out that since emerging from the Little Ice Age in the mid-19th century, the world has warmed significantly less than predicted by the UN's International Panel on Climate Change's models. In other words, a good test of a mathematical model is, does it predict past behavior for which you have actual data? You can say, okay, I've got this system, all right, I've got this model that supposedly predicts its behavior. Let's see if that model predicts its behavior based on its operation in the past.
Right.
Because I have those results. I don't have to guess about what might happen. I've got the actual results of this operation of this system. And if those things don't match up, it means your model is flawed. Well, that's exactly what this statement here is pointing out, is that they can crunch data that's existed that they have from the past regarding the warming period following the Little Ice Age, and the model over-predicts,
Correct.
okay, the amount of warming that should take place, which
Yep.
tells you that it's probably over-predicting the amount of warming that's going to take place as a result of the tiniest of tiny influences on the atmosphere anyway, carbon dioxide. Okay.
0.04%.
I think it's really 0.01.
Yeah.
I think the 0.04% is other constituents after the 3 or 4 main ones, mostly the 2 of nitrogen and oxygen. But the point being, carbon dioxide is a tiny fraction of the atmosphere. It is necessary for photosynthesis. Okay, CO2 makes for a greener, warmer world, which I think is better.
Right.
But
yeah,
it's
absolutely.
not. But our addition to CO2, human activity, and this addition to CO2 is minuscule.
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's certainly not worth the $368 billion that they just put into it that we don't have to spend.
And it's certainly not worth the absolute destruction of our energy sector in pursuit of these ridiculously unreliable and fanciful renewable sources of energy,
Right.
which don't work and are going to leave people freezing in the dark.
Yeah, that's right. So we're out of time, unfortunately.
Okay.
But do check out our YouTube channel.
Yes.
It's America Endangered TV. Be sure and put the TV on the end. Check it out if you want to look at some of our past shows, because there's stuff in there that you might want to look at again.
That's right.
So check it out. We're also on Rumble on America in Danger. So that's it for this week. We'll see you next Saturday. Have a great week. Good night.